May 1st, 1943. 0320 hours. U-Boat Command Headquarters, Berlin. Grand Admiral Karl Donitz stares at the operations map. Red pins mark 43 U-boats converging on convoy routes. Black pins mark 17 Allied merchant vessels sent to the bottom in the last 72 hours. His fingers trace the Wolfpack formations. "They cannot see us," he says to his staff. "Not at night, not underwater." The logic is ironclad. German U-boats run on the surface at night, where they're faster than most escorts. Their diesel engines leave minimal wake. The British ASDIC sonar only works when submarines are submerged. Allied aircraft can't fly at night over the mid-Atlantic gap. The mathematics are brutal and simple. In March, his wolves tore through Allied shipping like a hacksaw through timber. 567,000 tons sunk. 95 merchant ships obliterated. The convoy system is crumbling. Britain bleeds fuel, food, ammunition. Another 6 months of this, and Churchill will have to negotiate. Donitz knows it. His commanders know it. The statistics prove it. Kapitänleutnant Günther Poser, commanding U-202, wrote in his patrol diary, "We are the invisible death. Surface at night, strike, dive, vanish. They fire blind into the ocean, hoping for luck." But May is about to become the month German submariners will call Schwarzer Mai. Black May. What Donitz didn't know was that invisible had become visible. His submarines, running proud and fast on the surface at midnight, were lighting up Allied radar screens like searchlights. Every radio transmission his Wolfpacks made to coordinate attacks was intercepted, decoded, and plotted before the U-boats even reached the convoy. And that ASDIC sonar he dismissed? It had evolved. What none of them understood was that the war had already turned. Not in the boardrooms or on the beaches, in laboratories in Britain and America, or where engineers had just weaponized physics in ways the Kriegsmarine couldn't comprehend. The hunters were about to become the hunted. And they would never know what destroyed them until it was far too late. April 28, 1943. HMS Starling, Western Approaches, North Atlantic. Captain Frederick John "Johnny" Walker paces the bridge of his modified Black Swan-class sloop. Age 46. Royal Navy. Passed over for promotion twice. Spent years in staff positions watching younger men command ships. Now he has a command. Finally. His hands are rough from gripping plotting tables. His eyes are bloodshot from 60-hour watches. The crew calls him relentless because he refuses to break contact with a U-boat once acquired. Not for weather, not for low fuel, not for anything. The air in the North Atlantic tastes of salt and fuel oil. Wind cuts through wool watch coats at 38 knots. Temperature hovers at 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Men on deck watch rotate every 30 minutes, or risk hypothermia. Walker's ship isn't glamorous. No battleship guns, no aircraft carrier flight deck. Just a 350-ton escort vessel armed with 6 4-inch guns, depth charges, and something new called a Hedgehog, a forward-throwing anti-submarine mortar that looks like a medieval torture device. They laughed when they saw it installed. Walker's first officer, Lieutenant Hart, later recalled. 24 spigots arranged in a circle. Fired these little bombs ahead of the ship. Looked ridiculous. Like we were going to throw porcupine quills at submarines. Traditional depth charges had a fatal flaw. You had to sail directly over the submarine's last known position, dropping barrels of TNT set to explode at specific depths. But the moment you passed overhead, you lost sonar contact. you were attacking blind. The U-boat commander could dive hard left or right. You'd saturate the ocean with explosives and achieve nothing but dead fish. Success rate of depth charge attacks through 1943, 1 kill per 60 attempts. The Hedgehog changed the equation. 24 projectiles launched 250 yards ahead of the attacking vessel, 7.2 inches in diameter, 65 pounds each, 35 pounds of high explosive. They only detonated on contact. Contact meant hull. Contact meant kill. Walker understood something the Admiralty bean counters didn't. Anti-submarine warfare wasn't about dropping more explosives. It was about maintaining contact, knowing exactly where the enemy was when you struck. The Hedgehog let him keep his sonar on target throughout the entire attack run. Statistics would eventually prove it. Hedgehog attacks achieved 1 kill for every 5.7 attempts. A tenfold improvement. But Walker's real advantage wasn't technology. It was his mind. He invented creeping attacks. One escort maintained continuous sonar contact from a distance, while a second ship, running silent with ASDIC switched off, crept forward, using radio directions from the first vessel. The submarine never heard the killing ship approach. He drilled his crews until they could reload Hedgehogs in darkness and heavy seas. He trained his sonar operators to distinguish between water layers, thermoclines, schools of fish, and the faint return echo of a German pressure hull. "The Germans think we're incompetent," Walker told his crew in a briefing recorded in the ship's log. "They think we're blundering around, dropping charges randomly. Let them think that. We see them, we hear them, and we're coming." Meanwhile, 1,200 miles away in a country manor outside London, something even more devastating was taking shape. Bletchley Park, Station X, the codebreakers. Alan Turing's bombies were clacking through German Enigma settings at electronic speed. The 4-rotor naval Enigma, designated Triton, had been unbreakable for months. Then, in December 1942, they captured the codebooks from U-559 before it sank. Cost 3 British sailors their lives, 2 drowned, retrieving the documents. By May 1943, Bletchley was reading German naval traffic faster than some U-boat commanders. Every Wolfpack assembly position, every patrol route, every refueling rendezvous. The intelligence flowed to Admiralty Operational Intelligence Center. Commander Roger Wynne plotted every U-boat position on a master plot updated every 4 hours. When Donitz sent radio orders to concentrate his wolves for attack, Allied convoy routing centers rerouted the convoys around the ambush. Or better yet, sent hunter-killer groups straight into the Wolfpack's throat. But there was one more piece. One more technological leap the Germans never anticipated. Centimetric radar. 10-centimeter wavelength. Developed using cavity magnetron tubes the British had perfected in secret. American aircraft manufacturers mounted them in twin-engine bombers operating over the Atlantic. British Coastal Command installed them in Liberators flying from Northern Ireland and Iceland. The German Metox radar detector couldn't hear it. Designed to pick up 1.5-meter wavelength radar, Metox was useless against the new sets. U-boats running on the surface at night, charging batteries, thinking themselves invisible beneath the stars, they showed up on 10-centimeter radar from 12 miles away. Aircraft would lock on, close to 800 yards, drop flares. The U-boat crew would see the light and dive in terror, abandoning the attack, sometimes abandoning the watch crew topside who'd drown or freeze waiting for rescue that never came. Between centimetric radar, Hedgehog, creeping attacks, and Enigma decrypts, the Allies had assembled a technological hammer. The German U-boat force was about to discover they'd been fighting blind for months. April 29, 1943. Convoy ONS-5. 55 degrees north, 39 degrees west. Mid-Atlantic. 42 merchant ships steaming west. Slow convoy. 7-knot speed. Carrying ballast. Returning empty to North America for another load of war materials. Over the next 8 days, they'll face the largest Wolfpack concentration of the war. Over 40 U-boats. Dönitz has designated this convoy a priority target. Sink them. Break British morale. The math still favors Germany. Each U-boat costs 300,000 Reichsmarks to build. Each Allied merchant costs 3 times that plus crew plus cargo. The exchange rate is favorable. The convoy's escort includes HMS Tay, 4 destroyers, 5 corvettes. Outgunned, outnumbered. Operating in sea states that reach force 8 gales, 30-foot waves, spray freezing on the guns. The Germans expect easy hunting. They're wrong. May 4th, 0200 hours, U-630 makes radar contact on the convoy's port quarter. Submerges to periscope depth. Moves into attack position. Fires a spread of 3 torpedoes at overlapping targets. 1 torpedo runs hot and true. Hits SS Gorinda. The merchantman's back breaks. She sinks in 4 minutes. 17 men go down with her. U-630's commander reports the kill. Expects congratulations. Instead, 7 Allied escorts converge on his position within 18 minutes. How? High-frequency direction finding. HFDF. Huff-duff. The moment U-630's commander transmitted his contact report, British receivers on 3 escort vessels triangulated his position to within 200 yards. They didn't need sonar. They didn't need to see him. His radio transmission gave away his exact location. Dönitz's Wolfpack tactics required constant radio traffic. Pack commanders coordinating attacks. Individual boats reporting convoy speed and heading. Requests for permission to break off. Every transmission was a beacon. U-630 dove to 150 meters. Rigged for silent running. Shut down all non-essential systems. The crew sat in darkness listening to the escort's propellers overhead. HMS Tay passed 400 yards to starboard. ASDIC pinging. The sound penetrated the hull like a hammer on sheet metal. Then silence. Then the hedgehog salvo. 24 projectiles splashed into the ocean ahead of Tay's bow. They sank at 22 feet per second through the black water. No explosions. That meant no hits. The U-boat survived. But now the escort knew precisely where U-630 wasn't. Process of elimination. The submarine was running a predictable evasion pattern. Hard dive, cut left, wait for the escorts to pass. Captain John Gretton aboard HMS Tay radioed HMS Loosestrife, "Come in from the north. Cut your sonar. I'll vector you in." The creeping attack. Loosestrife crept forward at 4 knots, barely making wake, guided by Tay's continuous sonar bearing updates. The submarine never heard her approach over the ocean's ambient noise. When Loosestrife was 200 yards from the target, she fired another hedgehog salvo. 3 projectiles struck U-630's pressure hull. The explosions were simultaneous, 3 dull thuds that every ship in the escort group heard through the water. Then the underwater microphones picked up the sound of bulkheads collapsing. Compressed air screaming from ruptured ballast tanks. Steel crumpling like paper. U-630 imploded at 180 meters depth. All 48 crew died within 2 seconds. On the surface, The escorts marked the position and moved on. No time for celebration. 6 more U-boats were closing on the convoy. May 5th, daylight hours. Aircraft from Iceland located the convoy based on Bletchley Park's decrypted position reports. A Coastal Command B-24 Liberator, fitted with centimetric radar, flew search patterns at 800 feet. At 11:45 hours, the radar operator called out a surface contact 7 miles ahead. U-438, running on the surface, charging batteries. The aircraft climbed to attack altitude. U-438's Mitox radar detector remained silent. The submarine crew saw nothing, heard nothing. The Liberator dove at 240 knots, released 6 depth charges in a stick pattern. 3 charges exploded within 50 feet of U-438's conning tower. The blast wave shattered the ballast tank welds. Seawater poured into the pressure hull through a split seam near the forward torpedo room. U-438 went down stern first. 5 crew escaped the sinking but died of hypothermia within an hour in 42 degrees Fahrenheit water. The pattern repeated across May. U-109 sunk May 4th by aircraft. U-125 sunk May 6th. U-438 sunk May 6th. U-192 May 6th. U-531 May 6th. Every attack followed the same pattern. Enigma Intercept predicted the patrol area. HFDF pinpointed the exact submarine. Centimetric radar closed the final gap. Hedgehog or depth charges finished the kill. The Germans had no countermeasure because they didn't understand the threat. Dönitz believed the Mitox detector was malfunctioning. He blamed faulty equipment. He ordered technicians to check for radiation leaks from the Mitox units themselves, convinced the Allies were homing in on the detector's emissions. It was nonsense, but it consumed weeks of effort while his submarines kept dying. May 12th brought a new horror. The Mark 24 mine. That's what the Allies called it publicly. Designation was intentionally misleading. It was an acoustic homing torpedo. Dropped from aircraft. Ran on battery power. Tiny propeller. Maximum speed 12 knots. Slower than any U-boat. But once it detected the submarine's propeller noise, it locked on and tracked until impact. Between May 12th and May 31st, 15 U-boats died to Mark 24. The Germans never figured out what was happening. Submarines diving after air attacks simply vanished. No wreckage, no survivors. Just gone. It was as though the ocean itself had turned against us. Oberleutnant Herbert Werner wrote after the war. He survived 4 patrols in May 1943 through pure luck. The technological gap had become an abyss. Allied forces weren't just fighting U-boats. They were operating 3 moves ahead. Reading the enemy's mail, seeing invisible targets, tracking submarines that thought themselves hidden, striking with weapons the Germans didn't know existed. May 15th. Dönitz's war diary. The enemy has rendered the U-boat ineffective. He still didn't understand why. June 1st, 1943. 0800 hours. 600 miles south of Iceland. HMS Starling's radar picks up a surface contact. Range 11,000 yards. U-202, commanded by Kapitänleutnant Gunther Poser, veteran commander. 10 patrols. 3 ships sunk. Oak leaves to the Iron Cross. Considered one of the Kriegsmarine's best. Poser sees Starling's mast through his periscope, makes the correct tactical decision. Dive immediately. Don't risk surface engagement. Run silent. Wait for darkness. Walker smiles. He's going deep. Mark the position. Prepare for extended action. This one's not getting away. The hunt begins. What Poser doesn't know is that Walker has spent 3 years studying U-boat evasion patterns. Average German commander dives to 150 meters. Cuts to port or starboard at maximum silent running speed. Waits for the escorts to pass. Surfaces after nightfall 30 miles away. Standard procedure. Effective against most escort groups. Walker isn't most escort groups. Starling maintains sonar contact. Doesn't attack. Just tracks. The U-boat runs southwest at 4 knots. Walker follows at 5 knots, staying 1,200 yards behind. 3 hours pass. Poser orders a depth change to 200 meters, tries to slip beneath a thermal layer. Walker tracks him through it. He's getting nervous, Walker tells his sonar operator. Battery's draining. Air's getting foul. He'll have to surface soon. 6 hours. Inside U-202, conditions deteriorate. Temperature climbs to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity near 100%. Condensation drips from pipes. Carbon dioxide levels rising. The crew sucks lime to absorb CO2. Some men vomit from the heat. Poser knows he's being tracked. Can hear the escort screws maintaining perfect station astern. Decides to try the classic escape. Blow ballast, surface, run on diesels at maximum speed. 17 knots. Outrun the escort, then dive again in a new position. He surfaces at 14:30 hours. Walker is waiting. Starling was maintaining contact from 1,200 yards. The moment U-202's conning tower breaks the surface, Walker goes to flank speed. 20-knot sprint. Gun crews trained on target. Poser's deck gun crew scrambles topside to man the 88mm cannon. They get off 3 rounds, all miss. Starling opens fire at 800 yards. 4-inch guns, high explosive shells. The 3rd round hits U-202's conning tower, showering shrapnel across the deck. 2 German sailors collapse, blood mixing with seawater. Poser orders emergency dive. U-202 crash dives, goes to 250 meters. Walker doesn't use depth charges. He knows the submarine is damaged and desperate. Wounded animals are dangerous. Instead, he calls in HMS Wild Goose and HMS Kite. They take positions 2,000 yards on either side of Starling. 3-ship triangle formation surrounding the submarine's probable position. Then Walker executes his masterpiece, the coordinated creeping attack. Starling maintains active sonar contact. Wild Goose and Kite shut down their sonars, running silent. Walker vectors them in via radio, calling out bearing and range updates every 30 seconds. Wild Goose, target bearing 275, range 600 yards, depth 240 meters. Kite, target bearing 090, range 550 yards, depth 240 meters. U-202's sonar operator hears Starling's active pinging but doesn't detect the other 2 escorts approaching in silence. Poser thinks he's facing 1 ship. He's facing 3. At 16:45 hours, Wild Goose drops a full pattern of depth charges. 10 charges set for 250 meters. They bracket U-202 from port side. The explosions rupture the outer hull plating. Seawater jets into the control room through cracked seals. Poser goes deeper. 280 meters, beyond design depth. Kite approaches from starboard, fires Hedgehog. 14 projectiles strike within 20 yards of the submarine. The shock waves crack interior pipes. Hydraulic fluid sprays across the control room. Emergency lighting fails. Men work in darkness illuminated only by flashlights. 9 hours into the chase. Batteries at 15%. Air unbreathable. Temperature 104 degrees Fahrenheit. 3 crew members unconscious from heat stroke. The submarine's trim is off due to water in the bilges. She's heavy by the bow, difficult to control. Poser has 2 choices: surface and surrender, or stay down and suffocate. He chooses to surface. Blow all tanks. Emergency surface. Gun crews stand by. U-202 broaches like a wounded whale at 1930 hours, 15.5 hours after initial contact. The crew staggers onto deck, hands raised. Walker circles at 400 yards, guns trained. His voice over the loudspeaker in German. "Abandon ship! You have 5 minutes!" Poser and his crew launch inflatable rafts. 30 men escape before U-202's stern rises vertical and she slides beneath the waves. HMS Starling recovers 30 survivors. 18 died during the depth charge attacks, or from injuries sustained during the dive. Poser, wrapped in a Royal Navy blanket, sits on Starling's deck, watches Walker on the bridge. One of the British sailors later recalled Poser's words, "We thought we were fighting ships. We were fighting a system. You knew where we were before we knew ourselves." He was right. But the full scale of the disaster wouldn't become clear to the Germans for another 3 weeks. May 1943. Final tally. 41 U-boats sunk. 37 damaged beyond immediate repair. Nearly 2,000 German submariners dead, more than the previous 6 months combined. Allied merchant ship losses in May, 264,000 tons. The mathematics had inverted. For the first time in the war, U-boat losses exceeded Allied shipping losses. The exchange rate Donitz had counted on collapsed. May 24, 1943. Kriegsmarine Headquarters, Berlin. 1600 hours. Grand Admiral Karl Donitz picks up his pen, writes the order that ends Germany's Atlantic campaign. Owing to the present superiority of enemy defense, further attacks on convoys in the North Atlantic cannot be justified. All boats are to proceed south of the Azores. A temporary withdrawal, he told his staff. It was permanent. Force would continue operations until war's end. They'd sink more ships. They'd develop new technologies, snorkel breathing tubes, Type 20 submarines. But they never regained the initiative. The Allied technological hammer, radar, sonar, hedgehog, HEFDF, code-breaking, had destroyed not just submarines, but the entire strategic concept of the wolf pack. Germany built 1,162 U-boats during the war. 783 were destroyed. Of 40,000 men who served in the U-boat force, 28,000 died, a 70% fatality rate, the highest of any military service on either side of the war. And most of them never understood what killed them. July 30th, 1943. Bay of Biscay, 0600 hours. Walker's second support group encounters 3 Type 1C U-boats running on the surface in formation. A German tactical experiment, submarines traveling together, combining their anti-aircraft firepower to fight back against Allied aircraft. Walker signals, "General Chase. Permission for each ship to independently engage." The 3 U-boats, U-462, U-504, and U-461, spot the escorts and dive, but they're too slow. HMS Starling, Wild Goose, Woodpecker, Kite, Wren, and Cygnet converge from 6 directions. The engagement lasts 11 hours. All 3 U-boats are destroyed using creeping attacks and hedgehog salvos. 148 German sailors die. 14 survive. Walker's war diary entry that night. The enemy's morale is broken. They dive in panic. They no longer believe they can escape. He was correct. Post-war interrogation of German submarine crews revealed the psychological impact of May 1943. Oberleutnant Heinz Schaefer, who survived the war, after Black May, every patrol felt like a suicide mission. We knew the British could find us. We just didn't know how. The technology gap wasn't just about equipment. It was about information asymmetry. British Operational Intelligence Center knew the position of nearly every operational U-boat within a 6-hour window. German naval intelligence thought Allied convoys routed by luck and guesswork. British centimetric radar could detect surface submarines from 12 miles in total darkness. Germans thought they were invisible at night. Allied Hedgehog weapons achieved a kill rate of 1 in 6 attacks. Germans believed depth charges were still the primary threat. American, Mark the 24. Acoustic homing torpedoes stalked submarines like hunting dogs. Germans thought their boats were being destroyed by mines. The knowledge gap became a killing gap. By autumn 1943, U-boat crews called patrols one-way missions. The average operational lifespan of a U-boat commissioned after January 1943 was 4 months. New crews survived an average of 1.7 patrols before their boat was sunk. Werner Henke, commander of U-515, said during his capture in April 1944, "You hunted us like rats. We had courage, we had training, but you had science." The economic impact was equally devastating. By mid-1943, Allied shipyards were launching merchant vessels faster than U-boats could sink them. American Liberty ships, welded cargo vessels built in modular sections, rolled off production lines every 42 days. Britain had imported 68 million tons of supplies in 1939. That dropped to 23 million tons in 1941. By late 1943, imports recovered to 27 million tons and climbing. Germany's strategic objective, starve Britain into submission, had failed. The North Atlantic was now an Allied highway. Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion, required moving 156,000 troops and 50,000 vehicles across the English Channel, supplied by constant transatlantic convoy traffic. Without victory in the Atlantic, Overlord was impossible. What's it? The technological breakthroughs that destroyed the U-boat threat made D-Day possible. But the human cost remained staggering on both sides. Captain Frederick John Walker continued commanding the 2nd Support Group through 1944. By January 1944, his tally stood at 20 U-boats destroyed, more than any other Allied commander. But the relentless pace destroyed him. Walker died of a cerebral thrombosis on July 9, 1944, age 48. His doctors attributed it to extreme exhaustion and stress. He had been at sea for 37 consecutive months with minimal shore leave. The Battle of the Atlantic consumed him as surely as it consumed the U-boat crews he hunted. His funeral in Liverpool drew thousands. Submariners from the Royal Navy lined the streets in tribute to a man who'd mastered the art of anti-submarine warfare. Admiral Sir Max Horton, Commander-in-Chief Western Approaches, said at the funeral, "Walker didn't just sink U-boats. He created the doctrine that won the Atlantic. Every escort group in the fleet uses his tactics. Every new Hedgehog attack follows his methods. He turned a defensive campaign into an offensive slaughter." Across the Atlantic, the engineers and scientists who'd built the technological edge remained largely anonymous. The cavity magnetron researchers who enabled centimetric radar received no medals. The Bletchley Park codebreakers operated under Official Secrets Act restrictions until the 1970s. The acoustic torpedo developers worked in classified facilities and never discussed their work. Alan Turing, whose bombs cracked Enigma, and whose mathematical insights enabled convoy routing optimization, died in 1954. His contributions to winning the war remained classified. He never received public recognition during his lifetime. The men who built the invisible technological advantage remained invisible themselves. But their impact was measurable. From June 1943 through war's end, the U-boat force sank 3.2 million tons of Allied shipping. Sounds significant, until compared to the 17.8 million tons sunk from 1940 to 1943. The killing efficiency of the U-boat force dropped by 83%. From June 1943 onward, Germany lost an average of 20 U-boats per month. By 1945, that accelerated to 30 per month. The Kriegsmarine couldn't train crews fast enough to replace losses. Admiral Dönitz continued ordering submarines to sea until the last days of the war. Not because he believed they could win, but because every U-boat at sea tied down Allied resources that might otherwise support the invasion of Germany. His submarines became strategic sacrifices, pawns in a losing endgame. On May 4, 1945, Dönitz, now Führer of Germany following Hitler's suicide, ordered all U-boats to cease combat operations and surface. Of the 375 operational U-boats remaining, 218 surfaced and surrendered. The rest scuttled themselves rather than face capture. The final U-boat sunk in combat was U-320, destroyed by a British mine on April 26, 1945, 4 days before Hitler's death. The last U-boat to surrender was U-234, which surrendered to the USS Sutton off Newfoundland on May 14, 1945, carrying a cargo of uranium oxide intended for the Japanese atomic weapons program. The Battle of the Atlantic officially ended May 8, 1945, VE Day. It had lasted 2,074 days. It cost 36,200 Allied naval personnel and 36,000 merchant sailors their lives. 3,500 Allied merchant vessels destroyed. 175 Allied warships sunk. On the German side, 783 U-boats destroyed, 30,000 submariners dead out of 40,900 who served. The deadliest naval campaign in history, and the decisive campaign of World War II. Because without control of the Atlantic, there's no D-Day, no liberation of France, no bombing of German industry, no eventual defeat of Nazi Germany. The U-boats could have won the war. Instead, they became a case study in how technological surprise, information dominance, and scientific innovation can destroy even the most elite fighting force. Stand on the Liverpool waterfront today, look west across the Mersey toward the Atlantic. There's a statue there, Captain Frederick John Walker, bronze, weathered. Facing the ocean he patrolled it for 3 years. The inscription reads, "He sank 20 U-boats. 20 confirmed kills. More unconfirmed. More damaged and limping home. An entire operational doctrine built on relentless scientific anti-submarine warfare." But the real number is larger, because Walker's tactics were adopted fleet-wide. His creeping attacks became standard procedure. His insistence on maintaining contact, on treating ASW as a mathematical problem requiring precision rather than luck, that mindset transformed the entire Battle of the Atlantic. Historians estimate Walker's direct influence accounts for over 80 U-boat destructions through tactics his students employed. The man who was passed over for promotion twice became the most influential anti-submarine warfare commander in history. 10,000 miles away, at the National Cryptologic Museum in Maryland, there's an Enigma machine on display behind bulletproof glass. The placard explains how codebreakers at Bletchley Park cracked German naval communications. It doesn't mention that breaking Triton saved an estimated 2,000 Allied merchant vessels from destruction. It doesn't calculate the tonnage: 14 million tons of supplies, fuel, food, ammunition, aircraft, tanks, that reached Britain because convoys routed around wolf packs using decrypted intelligence. The invisible war remained invisible even in victory. In modern naval warfare, the lessons of May 1943 are doctrine: network-centric warfare, sharing data between platforms to create a common operating picture. That's the digital evolution of HFDF triangulation and coordinated attacks. Stealth technology, making platforms invisible to detection. The inverse of centimetric radar. Now everyone wants to be invisible again. Acoustic homing torpedoes, standard weapons on every modern submarine and surface combatant. The Mark 24's descendants. The Battle of the Atlantic proved that wars aren't won just by bravery or numbers. They're won by information, by technological edge, by the unsexy work of engineers and scientists creating capabilities the enemy doesn't know exist. Karl Donitz spent 10 years in Spandau prison after his war crimes conviction at Nuremberg. He was released in 1956, wrote his memoirs, lived quietly in Hamburg until his death in 1980 at age 89. In his memoirs, he blamed the Metox detector failure for losing the Atlantic campaign. He blamed Allied numerical superiority. He blamed bad luck. He never fully grasped that he'd been fighting blind against an enemy, reading his mail, seeing his submarines, and targeting them with weapons his engineers didn't know existed. That's the final lesson. The most dangerous enemy isn't the one you can see and prepare for. It's the one operating on a different level entirely. The U-boats thought they were invisible. They were wrong. And by the time they realized it, 41 submarines had already gone to the bottom in a single month, taking 2,000 men with them. There is a German memorial at Multenort near Kiel. Blackstone. Names etched in rows. 30,000 names of U-boat crewmen who never came home. Most of them died after May 1943. Most of them died never understanding what hunted them. Technology doesn't care about courage. Physics doesn't respect bravery. Science doesn't honor tradition. The Allied engineers, codebreakers, and tacticians who won the Battle of the Atlantic understood something profound. In modern war, the invisible advantage is everything. And the moment you become visible to an enemy who thought you were a ghost, you're already dead. That's what German U-boat commanders learned in May 1943. Too late to save themselves. Just in time to lose the war.